Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1034 for December 10th, 2023. Coming up in a few minutes.
Laid out before me was 14 of the most incredible whiskies, I've ever tried, and not many people, I'm sure, in the world have tried. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, and George, he doesn't drink the whiskey, he doesn't sample them, he only noses them because he has to sample up to 250 malts a day. So I had to do it myself, and my own mother would have been horrified. It wasn't just in the hours of daylight, it was before noons, but somebody had to do it.
We've seen a lot of partnerships between whiskey makers and design houses recently, and we're going to look at one of the newest ones this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth, a partnership between the Grant family's House of Hazelwood and Huntsman Savile Row, the bespoke tailor with offices in London and New York. They've collaborated on a 50-year-old Huntsman blended Scotch whiskey that is an extremely limited release, along with a special Tweed inspired by the whiskey for Huntsman's 175th anniversary. I'll talk with Huntsman creative director Campbell Carey and the House of Hazelwood's Jonathan Gibson on WhiskyCast In-Depth. That's just ahead, along with the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Happy holidays! On behalf of Redbreast, here's to you and yours. Eating well, enjoying a redbreast or two, and getting all snug and cosy on the couch. Reminds me of my own nest. Sure, there's no cushions or blankets, but I do have some very fancy decorative twigs, let me tell you.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Greetings, everyone. It's Gabriel Cartarello with Jewers, and I have big news. Jewers is about to unveil the first chapter of a 4-part collector series dedicated to honoring the most famous whiskey-producing regions of Scotland. More on that in a bit.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. The unions planning strikes against Chivas Brothers this week have called off their plans after the company made a new contract offer. Unite and GMB Scotland had planned to start strikes Tuesday after members rejected a 6.4% wage increase in October. Neither side has released the details of the new offer, but it's expected to be higher than the previous one and may include a one-time bonus payment. Both unions are taking the new offer to their members for a vote. The new offer essentially wipes out any possibility of a strike until after the holidays. Angus Dundee distillers and singer-turned-Heaven's Door whiskey frontman Bob Dylan have closed a business deal, one that doesn't involve whiskey. The family-owned whiskey maker has purchased Dylan's Scottish estate for £4.2 million. Dylan bought Altmore House with his brother in 2006, but hadn't used it in recent years because of the pandemic. It's not known what Angus Dundee will do with the estate. The company did not return emails this week asking about plans for the property. More bad news from Wall Street, where shares of Brown-Forman fell 11% Wednesday after the company missed its second quarter targets for earnings and issued a warning about full-year results. Sales for Jack Daniel's were off by 1%, Woodford Reserve sales were down by 3%, and Old Forester sales were off 5% during the quarter. Those numbers come off of higher-than-expected performances a year ago, but are being sign that consumers are becoming more cost-conscious. Brown-Forman shares are down 18% for the year. On top of that, London-traded shares of the parent company behind the Scotch Malt Whisky Society plunged by more than 20% at one point on Wednesday. The artisanal spirits company blamed weaker sales in China and a softening of conditions in the market for luxury products for missing its revenue target by £2 million. The company expects to break even this year, with expectations of profitability pushed back a year to 2024. In other news, Whiskey Advocate announced its 20 most exciting whiskeys of the year this week, led by Glenglassaugh's Sand End Single Malt. Highland Park Cask Strength Batch 4 came in second, followed by Westland's 8th edition of Garyana, Little Book Chapter 7 in Retrospect, and Wild Turkey's Master's Keep Voyage Edition. Meanwhile, Whisky Magazine announced its Scotland Icons of Whisky Awards winners Thursday night in a ceremony at the Scotch Whisky Experience in Edinburgh. Diageo was named Distiller of the Year, followed closely by White & Mackay. Hannah Whisky Merchants was named Independent Bottler of the Year, with cask share highly commended. Stephen Woodcock of Glenmurray was named Master Distiller/Blender of the Year, and the team at Jura Distillery was named Production Team of the Year. Ardbegg's Jackie Thompson and Tim Morrison of A. Dewar Rattray were added to Whisky Magazine's Hall of Fame. I mentioned Cask Share a minute ago. Their latest release is open for bidding through this Thursday. It's a rare Macallan single cask distilled in 1991 with only 190 bottles available. Bids start at $4,250 a bottle. There's a link for more details at the WhiskyCast website. Other new whiskeys out this week. Kentucky's Preservation Distillery has added 2 bourbons to its very old St. Nick range. The notorious OSN 16-year-old bourbon, and Straight Out of Bardstown, a 9-year-old Kentucky bourbon. Both are available exclusively at the distillery in Bardstown. Puncher's Chance Bourbon is out with a new bourbon and Irish whiskey blend. The Unified Belt takes 4-year-old bourbon and Irish whiskeys and blends them together, with 14-year-old bourbon finished in a combination of PX and Oloroso sherry casks. It retails for $149.99 a bottle. Sagamore Spirit has released the 2023 edition of its port cask-finished rye whiskey. It was aged for 6 years in ex-bourbon barrels, then finished for 3 more years in port barrels from Maryland's Bordy Vineyards. It's available at the distillery in Baltimore and select markets for $99.99 a bottle. Milam & Green has released the 3rd and final edition in its Castle Hill Vintage series. The 15-year-old bourbon is the oldest age statement whiskey ever released by Milam & Green and comes in at 57.25% ABV. It carries a recommended retail price of $199.99 a bottle, and I'll have my tasting notes for it in a few minutes. Wilderness Trail Distillery has released a rarity, its first 10-year-old wheated bourbon from the 10-year-old distillery. In fact, the single-barrel release comes from the Second Barrel co-founders Shane Baker and Dr. Pat Heistfield on December 5, 2013. It's available only at the distillery for $280 a bottle. Berry Brothers and Rudd is wrapping up its 325th anniversary celebrations with the final release of whiskeys and rums for the year. The lineup includes a 2012 Daluan, a Strathclyde single grain from 2005, and a Milton Duff 1990. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar and see what's coming up event-wise around the world. Julio's Liquors in West Hampton, Massachusetts has a Dalmore tasting this Wednesday night and a Kentucky Owl tasting on December 22nd. After the holidays, the Harrow Whiskey Festival kicks off the new year in London January 12th and 13th, along with the Arctic Whiskey Festival that same weekend in Tromsø, Norway. The Edmonton MS Whiskey Festival is January 17th in Edmonton, Alberta, followed the next night by the Calgary MS Whiskey Festival in Calgary. The Victoria Whiskey Festival kicks off that same night and runs through the 21st in Victoria, British Columbia. And finally, the Southport Winter Whiskey Festival is January 19th and 20th in Southport, England. We're adding new events for 2024 to the calendar all the time, so if you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendar at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
At Dewar's, we are gearing up to unveil a prestigious 4-part collector series of exceptionally high-end blended malts. The first gem in this collection, none other than the extraordinary Dewar's Double 37-year-old, a blended malt that is nothing short of remarkable. The Double 37-year-old undergoes Dewar's cutting-edge 4-stage aging process, meticulously designed to draw out the essence of whiskey barrels dating back to the late 80s, The result? An impeccable balance and a level of smoothness that is off the charts. To pay homage to the Speyside whiskey producing region, it gets an extra tip of the hat with a finishing process resting in Oloroso sherry casks that once cradled the prestigious Altmore single malt whiskey. As for the taste adventure, brace yourself for captivating notes that include the warmth of cinnamon, the velvety sweetness of heather honey, succulent juiciness of peaches, zesty pops of orange peel, and a decadent shower of brown sugar. And let me be clear, I'm merely giving you a glimpse of the sensational flavor adventure this whiskey has in store. This exceptional whiskey, though, is a rare find, so stay vigilant and find it at a store near you.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. This week, Diageo announced that noted designer Philippe Stark has signed on to be creative director for Mortlock. It's the latest in a growing list of links between whiskey makers and design houses. And we're going to look at one of those links this week, the partnership between the Grant family's House of Hazelwood and the noted Savile Row tailor Huntsman. The House of Hazelwood whiskeys come from the Grant family's personal stocks and don't come cheaply. Neither does a Huntsman suit, for that matter. Their partnership led to the Huntsman Blend, a 50-year-old blended Scotch whiskey that retails for $8,900 a bottle. It comes with 2 mini bottles and a flask wrapped in Huntsman's custom House of Hazelwood tweed, which is available through Huntsman for bespoke suits and jackets. I talked with Huntsman creative director Campbell Carey and House of Hazelwood director Jonathan Gibson on a Zoom call this week. So I'm curious, what prompted a collaboration like this between Huntsman, Savile Row, and House of Hazelwood?
We are 175 years next year. Henry Huntsman founded H. Huntsman & Son in 1849. And since joining the business in 2014, myself and our chairman, Pierre Lagrange, who's also a huge whiskey fan, have always talked about, a Huntsman whiskey and what that would look like. So we did a lot of work. We still do a lot of work with the Isla Woolen Mill in Bridgend on Isla, and visiting a few distilleries up there. We kind of threw a few things around and talked about it some more, and then we sat on it for quite a while. And then we started saying, look, this 175th anniversary is just around the corner. We should get on with this. This was probably 2019. And a chance meeting with Pierre and Lauren Cousin out in New York. He's the Glenfiddich ambassador. And then Pierre got chatting to Kirsten Grant, and they, both thought that Hazelwood was a perfect fit. The lineage, the history, the pedigree of both houses, it's a perfect synergy. There's so much we have in common, to be a Huntsman customer is quite a kind of, you're part of an exclusive club. It's kind of, if you know, and I think it's the same with Hazelwood. If you're a collector of their whiskies, you're an uber fan. You're spending serious money and you're serious about your whiskey. It's not no messing about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also just parallels between the approach, isn't there, Campbell? Where both businesses, independently owned, which helps in terms of freedom to have a certain approach with regards to craft, but also something that we spoke about when developing the whiskey and looking at the parallels between the two businesses. You've got very much a focus on patience. To be a Huntsman customer, you need to be a patient man or woman, because it takes a little while to get a piece prepared, and obviously patience is key within the whiskey industry, particularly.
I think anticipation is a bit more.
And the
anticipation
that we
more
bring to market.
Anticipation and commissioning a suit, and also waiting and seeing how this whiskey is going to turn out. That's the thing. Part of the kick is actually ordering something and then not quite ready yet. Oh man, it's that waiting on something that's you've commissioned, and it's something quite special.
That anticipation leads to this question. What went into making the special Huntsman Tweed?
When I had the chance of a lifetime to join Jonathan and George Patterson up in Dufftown, 2020, it was the last day or the first day of lockdown. Laid out before me was 14 of the most incredible whiskies, I've ever tried, and not many people, I'm sure, in the world have tried. It was 11 o'clock in the morning, and George, he doesn't drink the whiskey, he doesn't sample them, he only noses them because he has to sample up to 250 malts a day. So I had to do it myself, and my own mother would have been horrified. It wasn't just in there was a daylight; it was before noon, but somebody had to do it. And halfway through this tasting, I was like, Pierre and I had talked about making a bespoke tweed. All you see in the walls behind me is one of our house tweeds. Huntsman is the home of tweed. We even since the 1900s we've made special commission house cloths only, and it was going to be a woven woolen tweed. And then halfway through the tasting, like I said, I thought, what, this isn't going to cut it. It's got to be something more elevated. So the grain component is aged in Oloroso cask, and it got me thinking about the Escorial wool, which is the Spanish royal flock of sheep that go back to the 16th century. And it's a rare breed of sheep that outperforms cashmere in many levels in softness, durability, wear. When you handle it, it feels just like cashmere, if not better. It's got more body. So we started talking to Escorial. We've worked with them in the past and decided that was going to be the kind of the benchmark for what we were building with the whiskey, what that was going to look like. And it was so easy to, come up with elements to colour, to design the weave itself. There's so much inspiration up there. So it's the two graves of the granite building of the distillery from the Blue Hill Quarry is the base colour of the weave, and it's an ancient weave of barleycorn. It's a barleycorn weave which goes back, to centuries. And then we started looking at the accent colours of the surroundings of the distillery and within. So you've got the heathery purple heather, and then the greens of the ferns on the hillside. And then during the tour of the distillery, you realise that the still room is the heart. It's where the action happens, and it's where the spirit's first born. And you get that beautiful oxidization of the still safe, the brass, and the aquamarine of the oxidization. So that runs right through the middle of the check to denote the still room. But it was so easy. There were so many inspiring things and people up there,
And Jonathan, what went into creating the whiskey? A 50-year-old blended Scotch is a tough animal to create.
Yeah, I would actually say that the process for crafting the whiskey probably shared a lot of the ambition behind what Campbell's just described with the cloth and the jacket itself. And I think first and foremost with the whiskey, what we wanted to create was something that was just a sheer pleasure to drink. And that sounds like a silly comment in a way when you're talking about something of that age, but not all old whiskies are easy to drink and have that sort of decadent sense of pleasure about them. And like the cloth, we wanted something that if you held it at arm's length, you hold that cloth at arm's length, it is beautiful, but you don't see the detail, so you can enjoy it as a lovely looking jacket at arm's length. And the closer you get to it, as Campbell's just described, you can see this, barleycorn pattern. You can see all of the accent colours. You can see all of the, the stories that join that jacket to the place where it came from. And that's really what we wanted with this whiskey is, a 50-year-old blended Scotch whiskey is something very special anyway. But we wanted something that was just a joy to drink so you could interact with it on that level, sort of sheer enjoyment. But if you also want to sit and study it, and enjoy it in a nosing glass, a Glencairn or a Copita, there's all of that depth and layers of flavour there. So it was really about sort of those two balancing aspects. The drinkability, the sheer decadent joy of something that age, and the pleasure that can bring, whilst also making sure that it had the complexity and the layers of detail that you'd want from something at this age and at this price point. And for me, that's what a great blended Scotch should have. And this, we kind of went into it with the ambition to, from our perspective, and everyone has a different perspective on what this will look like, but to create the ultimate blended Scotch whisky.
And do you think, Jonathan, on a blind tasting, many people would guess where it's from?
Well, I mean, obviously one of the joys of blends are sourced from different distilleries, so that there's different geographical points that have gone into this. But one of the interesting things about this blend is it's got a strong Speyside influence, sort of Speyside malt influence. It's got the sort of toasty oak character. It's got a fruitiness to it. It's got the sort of American oak vanilla character to it. So it in a way it presents its Speyside roots quite nicely, despite the fact that the components have been sourced widely from across Scotland.
We've seen a number of partnerships between whiskey brands and design houses over the last several years. What is in this for both brands? And Jonathan, I'll start with you. What's in this for House of Hazelwood?
For us, for House of Hazelwood, there's quite a strong contingent of whiskey enthusiasts within the Huntsman client base. And so for us, it's a great opportunity to connect with those individuals who may not have come across House of Hazelwood previously. It also, from a whiskey making point of view, one of the great things that it does is it brings a new perspective to the idea of blending. And Campbell's been doing what he does for a very long time, and it just kind of inviting other genuinely craft focused individuals into the process. It can spark some new ideas and make you think about our own craft in different ways. And I can't personally take any credit for the blend, but because it was really a work between Campbell and our blending team. But I know that I think both parties come out of it with some new ideas, some new thoughts. So it's in one part about connecting with people who may be interested in what we're doing, but there is also this this idea of challenging yourself, having someone come in who thinks about things slightly differently, and pushing you therefore to think about what you do slightly differently.
Campbell, what does Huntsman get out of this besides celebrating your 175th anniversary?
Selfishly, I had an amazing time with the house itself. I guess it's another element of Bespoke, and what Bespoke means to have something created for you and only you. And the short run of this, 75 bottles mean that it's a very small run niche product. And downstairs in our shop, especially on an afternoon like today, we'll have the fire on. We've got stag heads above the fireplace that were left here by a customer in 1921 and never picked up. We've got some nice comfy sofas, and very rarely do customers refuse a little dram when it's nice and cold outside. So we'll get some nice whiskies downstairs, and to be able to offer the Huntsman blend to our clients when we had a great press event that Jonathan and I hosted an event up here for kind of clients who we know that like whiskey, our customer profiles we went through and invited, and it was like the golden ticket for them because we sampled 7 whiskies, was it? I think
it was, yeah.
Yeah, last Tuesday, and it was so much fun just to sit around the table and the customers got along so well. The whiskey helped. So it's opening up. Our 175th anniversary has got to be celebrated. Huntsman's such an amazing place. If you're ever in town, please come along. I'll give you the royal tour. But we really had to do something special for this celebration. And I think we looked at a few Islay distilleries, and it's one of my favourites. It's one of Pierre's favourites. But then we said, is it our customer demographic? Is it everyone's cup of tea? I think this whiskey is such a great and a great all-rounder for us and Hazelwood.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, there's always going to be someone in the room who doesn't enjoy whiskey, but for anyone that enjoys whiskey, they will find something that they love about this. It's very accessible, as I said, very drinkable, very decadent, but it's definitely something that everyone will enjoy if they're lucky enough to try it.
Only 75 bottles of the Huntsman blend are available, and we have links at the WhiskyCast website if you're interested. Thanks to Campbell, Carey, and Jonathan Gibson for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. Let's kick off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with Whiskey Advocate's #1 whiskey of the year, Glenglassaugh's Sand End Single Malt Scotch. It's bottled at 50.5% ABV, and the nose is grassy with lemon zest, dried flowers, fresh berries, and a hint of butterscotch. The taste is tart and luscious with lemon zest, and a nice burst of allspice and cinnamon bark that comes alive slowly, along with a touch of barley sugar maltiness and a hint of honey. The finish is long, subtle, and slightly tart with a lingering hint of spice. It's an excellent, well-rounded dram, and I'm scoring the Glenglassaugh's Sand End a 94. The Macallan's A Night on Earth in Scotland is a seasonal release celebrating Scotland's Hogmanay festivities on New Year's Eve each year. It's bottled at 43% ABV, and the nose has touches of shortbread cookies, a hint of citrus, honey, and vanilla. The taste has citrusy notes of orange peel and lemon zest, balanced by honey, vanilla, and subtle spices that come alive leading into the finish, which is nice and long with lingering touches of cinnamon and allspice. I'm scoring the Macallan's A Night on Earth in Scotland a 91. I mentioned Milam & Green's Castle Hill Batch No. 3 during the news, and I received a sample this week. The 15-year-old bourbon is bottled at 57.25% ABV, and the nose has touches of red apples, nutmeg, dried fruits, a hint of oak tannins, honey, and almonds. The taste is spicy and astringent with notes of cinnamon and black pepper, a hint of clove, oak tannins, black cherries, and almond oil. The finish, long and oaky with black cherries and lingering spices. It's a very complex bourbon, and I'm scoring Milam & Green's Castle Hill Batch No. 3 a 93. Finally, let's look at Maverick Whiskey's Samuel Maverick Bottled in Bond Triticale Whiskey. This single-barrel release is 4 years old, and of course it's bottled at 50% ABV. The nose has touches of baking spices, molasses cookies, and honey. The taste is spicy with cinnamon, clove, and chili powder notes, a touch of cherries, molasses cookies, honey, and butterscotch. The finish is dry with lingering spices, and I'm scoring the Samuel Maverick Bottled in Bond Triticale Whiskey an 88. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of nearly 3,600 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at WhiskyCast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Not to throw shade on other holiday gifts, but gift cards, really? First, you can't pour, sip and share them. And second, they're so small that you can easily forget about them. Wait, do people say that about me?
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's open up the WhiskyCast community app and see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is brought to you by Waterford Whisky. I asked in the app this week what one whiskey-related gift our community members would most like to receive this holiday season, and lots of people apparently want whiskey books. Juan Cruz wants a copy of the Distillation of Whiskey book we featured a couple of weeks ago on the show. Jeff6191 wants a copy of Experiencing Irish Whiskey by Drew Hanisch. I have to admit that one is new to me. Jeff also wants a Total Wine and More gift card so he can buy a bottle of Irish whiskey to sip on while reading. Chris Ratcliffe wants either A Spirit of Place by Charles MacLean or the similarly named A Sense of Place by Dave Broom. Other gift requests from the good little boys and girls in the WhiskyCast community app. Peter at Whiskey Ranked wants a bottle of Linkwood, then he changed that. Instead, he wants Glenmorangie to start bottling at 46% ABV. He always thought Glenmorangie could do with a little more bottling strength. Gary H.N. in Australia asked Santa for a WhiskyCast Glencairn. Law School Drunk would like a bottle of Glenfarclas distilled in his birth year. And Dennis asked for a travel voucher to return to Scotland and writes, seriously, I appreciate anyone using some of their hard-earned money to buy me a bottle. Regardless of what it is, it's the thought that counts. I should note, absolutely no one asked for whiskey stones. On the subject of the Chivas Brothers strike, Scott Rogers in Wisconsin originally posted, thanks to family history, I'm pretty firm about not crossing a picket line, so now that a strike has been called, no matter how limited, no Glenlivet or other Chivas-owned bottles for me. And after the strikes were postponed, he updated his comments with this. Workers have called off the strikes for now, so I'll cease boycotting Chivas products in the name of solidarity and resume just not buying Chivas products because they don't appeal much to me. We're still looking for your suggestions on the top whiskey news stories of the year. Share your thoughts with us in the WhiskyCast community app or on social media. We're on Threads, X, Facebook, and Instagram at WhiskyCast, and the email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is brought to you by Waterford Whisky, on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com.
Trevor Harris, Alan Ross and Amy Jackson, Pat and Dennis Booth, Alan Mooney, John MacDonald. Just a few of the growers who help to make us the biggest distillers of organic whiskey in the world. Waterford Whisky, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. I mentioned the Samuel Maverick bottled and bond triticale whiskey a few minutes ago, but what is triticale? Well, it's a hybrid of wheat and rye that was first created in 1873 by Scottish botanist A.S. Wilson. It looks a lot like rye and has some of the same characteristics, especially disease resistance, with the yield potential and grain quality of wheat. Dr. Ken Maverick of San Antonio's Maverick Distilling is one of the few distillers using triticale on a regular basis.
Triticale was bred to be, wheat and rye essentially, and we've even blended our rye and our wheat to try to kind of replicate it, and it's a totally different flavor. I think there are hints of rye, with a little bit of the heat and maybe the cinnamon and the triticale. But that comes much more forward in the rye. It seems a much more subtle in the triticale, and I guess I might say delicate or balanced. It's not like two flavors are competing with each other. They seem to be well blended together.
Triticale is used primarily as a feed grain, but has been used in whiskeys before, most notably the 6-grain Jim Beam Signature Travel Retail release about a decade ago. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this week's WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and of course a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from the Apple and Google App Stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Dewar's Double Double 37-year-old blended malt whiskey is a true collector's treasure, a rarity worth hunting for and cherishing, perhaps sharing with the lucky few. Please drink responsibly. Copyright 2023 Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 48% alcohol by volume.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever go out drinking with a peacock? Always the same. Few too many, tail feathers come out, drinks get knocked over, bartender's not happy, night's over before it started. All I'm saying is, don't be the peacock in your group.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2023, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.